Africa is not our home.
The Indians were you.
Welcome to the Aboriginal Channel. This episode will be a prelude to Virginia's ugliest Aboriginal truth and tribe to county read. Right here at FloridaMemory.com, State Library and Archives of Florida, they're talking about Harriet Tubman's Florida legacy. It says, many might assume that the Underground Railroad traveled in one direction, north to freedom, away from slavery and the plantations of the South. Few realize that runaway slaves also fled south into Florida for almost 2 centuries before the Civil War. Now, from all this reading I've been doing, I pretty much figured out that when they use the word slaves, they're talking about Indians, for one, and more directly, they're talking about the warrior class of Indians. So when it says slaves also fled south into Florida for almost 2 centuries before the Civil War started in 1861. So in the 1830s, 40s, and 50s, you had 2 Seminole Wars, or 2 Florida Indian Wars. And if you know the history, you know that they say Harriet Tubman took people on horseback, or however they made it way from Florida to all the way to Canada on what was called the Underground Railroad, which was a connection of people who just helped you out and kept you hid from way down there to way up yonder, which is very untrue and unbelievable. So we'll get to my take on it. And never mind this blog being from 2013, 7 years ago, because I just now heard about the mounds, and they're older than anybody living on the earth today. And sometimes you got to look back to move forward. Correct. It says, in recognition of Black History Month, this 3-part series of blogs posts will introduce aspects of resistance to slavery in Florida history. Now, we know there's no slavery history in Florida. There's history of Indian and U.S. troops, battles, and settlers being behind log fort walls up and until after the Civil War. It goes on to say that we begin towards the end of the story with the Moses of the Underground Railroad, which is Harriet Tubman. Referring to her as the Moses is a symbolism or allegorical message that sort of like an innuendo to say that they know she was an Indian, but we don't, because when we hear them call her the Moses, we think of the Moses in the Bible, which is a reflection because Indians had religion and they had prophets or messengers of God. Most of the accounts of Harriet Tubman state that she did most of her saving out of the Maryland area. So apparently they had heavy slavery in way up north in Maryland. But here it says that she has a history in Florida. So we're going to say that her route was in between Florida and Maryland. And once I read somewhere that her time as the conductor of the Underground Railroad ended in 1858. As I dug into the history, I seen that the last Seminole War ended in 1858, indicating that she wasn't saving so-called slaves, rather saving wounded warriors from the South to up north, somewhere in between Florida and Maryland. If you were to ask me, looking at this Civil War's battles map, I'd say she was taking people during the late 1850s when they were fighting down here, all down up and through here. This is the 1860s. But in the late 1850s, I believe Harriet Tubman was taking people either on the railroads that existed from down here into here, over here in the South Carolina, over here in the North Carolina, and then up here into Virginia, where you see all these battles at, which makes more sense than any other story we've been provided with. There's another route she could have taken as well, which could have been over here to Baldwin, and then up through here, up through the Cherokees territory, all the way up where you see it. All these battles stay connected. Could have went right through here, through Georgia, straight through the Cherokees, Creeks, Cherokees, the Yuchi. She also took all the way up and through here. If you look at this, you can see the routes. But she saved a lot of people out of Maryland. I believe she brought them down here to Virginia. Right here is the Powhatans, which is a bunch of different tribes that got together. That was a confederation. But we'll go back over here and look at a little more of this blog. It says, Harriet Tubman, known as the conductor of the Underground Railroad, spent time in Florida during her years of fighting for freedom. Born into slavery in Maryland circa 1820, Tubman escaped in 1849 or 1850. She made numerous return trips to the South in order to free relatives and complete strangers alike. Tubman and her associates relied on a series of safe houses along the Underground Railroad. These stopping points represented a network of abolitionists committed to aiding escaped slaves in pursuit of freedom. Scholars estimate that Tubman personally conducted at least 300 slaves to freedom in the 1850s and 60s. However, when you go look at some of the other history, it says that in 1859, she bought a house in New York or something like that and settled down. So in 1859, she was completely done. So it wasn't the 1860s that she was saving anybody. The fact that she spent time in Florida while fighting for freedom but was born in Maryland gives you the route. But if you look on this map, from Florida to Maryland is a long way on foot or even horseback. So there's definitely something more to it than the story they're giving us. But we'll move on down into the blog. Right here you see a so-called slavery ad from 1860 in Tampa, right? Tampa is right here where this big block is at. That's Hillsborough County. However, all the counties surrounding Hillsborough, Pinellas right here was created in 1911. Pasco was created in 1887. This big one right here, right next to it, was created in 1861, a year after that slave ad. Manatee was created in 1855. Lake was created in 1887. Hardy was created in 1921. Hillsborough County itself was created in 1834, but remember, they just sent somebody out to outline the area. They weren't moving in on top of the Indians because it just wasn't going down like that. Indians had been fighting Europeans in Florida from the 18 teens up and through this Civil War. So there wasn't that kind of slavery down here. And then we already looked through the ugliest aboriginal truth in Florida, where a bunch of these places wasn't even created yet, which indicates the heavy presence of American Indians and Europeans only existing at the safety of forts like Fort Myers and other places. In all these places, when you look at the census counts in like 1830 in Florida, it was like 15,000 or 16,000 blacks. Down here in Louisiana in 1810 or 1800, it's so-called only 42,000 blacks. In Mississippi, it was only so-called about 3,000 to 5,000 in 1810. Alabama, there was about so-called 5,000 blacks. But when you got up here to Virginia in 1790, there was 300,000. North Carolina had a little over 100,000, and South Carolina had a little over 100,000. But all these other places was lacking. That indicates that there wasn't slavery in these places. Look at all these battles. Then all the forts that they had the forts, and at those forts they would create an agency, Atacapa or a Calcasieu, or the Indian agencies they were creating, Choctaw Indian agencies. They would create the agency at the forts. From the forts they would make a county or a parish, and from those added up counties and parishes they created these lines that outline these states and called that area inside those lines the state. Through the history books, which has all been a lie. So therefore, if it's a lie, then what's the truth? If it's a lie, then what's the truth?